Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our first live streamed Homeless Leadership Coalition public meeting. I want to thank you all for joining us, and I want to thank Connect Central Oregon for making the technology possible for us. This is a new format for us that we're trying out, so just a little bit about the format. The presenters will be live, and everyone else joining will be seeing us live on Facebook and or YouTube, whichever you're coming in through. We're not taking live questions and live announcements, but I'll be making announcements that were given to us towards the end of the meeting. And to save everybody a lot of trouble, all of the announcements are also posted on our website, cohomeless.org, including all the links. So don't worry about links today, just go to cohomeless.org, scroll down below the picture, and you'll find a link to today's meeting. Also, if you have some comments, questions, or suggestions for future meetings, please feel free to contact me at cochair@cohomeless.org. We will be monitoring the chat, and we may, if we have time or we get relevant questions, introduce those, but we're kind of on a hard hour here today, so we'll have to see how that works out. So without delay, go to our first speaker. I want to thank Scott Cooper, Executive Director of NeighborImpact, for joining us. As most of you know, NeighborImpact is involved in almost all of the various homeless service projects throughout the Central Oregon in one way or another. And Scott's probably also our leading resource for keeping track of what's going on in Salem regarding homeless legislation. So Scott, if you're ready, take it away.
Thank you, James, and thank you, HLC. And I just want to start by saying thank you to all of you for your continuing advocacy for the homeless population and your willingness to show up at the table month after month and talk about really difficult issues. This is a tough time. It has long been a tough time. It is probably a tougher time than ever for us to attract attention to this among so many other issues, and having a group of people who are willing to put their voices forward makes an enormous difference in terms of getting Salem, Washington, D.C., or even Bend, Prineville, or Madras to pay attention to the issues of the people that we serve. I want to talk in three areas about some of the work we've been doing. Probably the most urgent work we've been doing at the moment has been around rental assistance. The last numbers I saw were about 15% of renters in Central Oregon are not making a rental payment during the COVID crisis. So for now, that works out fine because we've got folks who are under the eviction moratorium, and so landlords can't do much about that. But obviously, that debt continues to grow. When we look forward into the end of the eviction moratorium at the end of September, that could be a very, very big problem in terms of increasing numbers of homelessness. So we do have a rental assistance program open. As of yesterday, we had put through about $1.2 million. We had provided 1,189 months worth of rent paid, catching up both arrears and paying forward. By the way, if you take that 1,189 and you divide it by 12, it comes right at 100 years worth of rent paid, which I think is just kind of a cool number all the way around. Most importantly for that work, we have been doing a lot of cross-cultural outreach. So about 1 in 4 of those rents have gone to Latinx households, and about 1 in 5 have gone to a household which is reporting being non-white. So there has been a good opportunity to reach out into that community. We are a little concerned about the impact on the undocumented community. We've had 4 different sets of guidance from Oregon Housing and Community Services saying, yes, we can, and no, it will not implicate a public charge if we go ahead and we pay rental assistance to those folks. Oh, wait, yes, it might. No, it can't. Yes, it might. No, it can't. We still don't know. So we have been using state resources that don't implicate that and can be used for undocumented households whenever they have been presenting. That's a continuing concern because those state resources are far more limited than the federal resources that we receive from the CARES Act. So we'll continue to monitor that and try and get a good answer on that. You know, obviously, we would really appreciate your help in trying to encourage people to apply for rental assistance. Households around 62,000 for a family of 4, 49,000 for a family of 62,000 in Deschutes County, 49,000 in Crook or Jefferson counties can apply for that rental assistance. It's 80% of the area median income. So encourage people not to wait until the end of the moratorium to come and see us. We need to get the money out the door, and we have to spend this money by the 30th of December. So the later they wait, the less help we're going to be able to get out the door there. Shelter, I want to move on to shelter. It's hot out. Well, for our Central Oregon standards, it's not all that hot outside, but it's the warm weather when we don't worry so much about keeping people from freezing to death. As we are very aware, however, that winter comes upon us way too fast, and we know the experience of having to scramble and figure out what we're going to do about shelters next year. Next year is going to be really interesting, and we want to start planning earlier around what's happening with shelter in each one of our communities. I think all of you know that shelter looks very, very different depending on where you live, but Central Oregon probably does better than any other region in the state in terms of trying to coordinate some sort of response across the whole geography and say we're going to have something available everywhere. Biggest concerns we have right there is we don't have a clear funding path forward for how shelter is going to be paid for. The money that was set aside for winter shelter by the last legislature was swept by Oregon Housing and Community Services, and all the money that was supposed to be available for winter shelter for this coming year was taken and put toward COVID response. OHCS has indicated they intend to replace those funds, but they don't know how they're going to replace them. So at this point, we're not sure exactly what we're working with, but we're going to take them at their word, and we're going to assume that somehow they're going to figure out where they're going to get money to replace the money that they took, and we'll have the same amount of money to work with we had last year. Our biggest concern around shelter is that we have depended in this region very heavily on churches to be a key partner in our sheltering. And of course, with COVID sweeping through here, there is some uncertainty as to whether churches are willing to open their spaces and make those spaces available because of concerns out of COVID contamination, and also whether their elderly volunteer base is going to be able to step forward and serve in those areas. So shelter next year may be different. It may look different in each community than it has looked in the past. It may have different partners. It may require us to put in more financial resources than we put in the past. It may have more hoteling, moteling elements or paid staff or something else like that. It's a little hard to know, but we are certainly moving forward, and we will rely heavily on the shelter committee of the HLC as our partner in making sure that that happens as we move forward. I think one of the other things we have to be concerned about is social distancing. Unless we miraculously get some sort of vaccine in the fall, we're going to have to operate shelters with less capacity than we've had in before because we have to create this space between the people. So that may mean that we need more facilities than what we've needed in the past. Changing slightly over to moteling operation, NeighborImpact is currently operating a motel that we rented in Bend. I'm not going to identify the name of the motel at their request, but it's in the area, and that is a motel which is available for people who need to isolate due to COVID. It is primarily for the benefit of people who have COVID and are homeless and have nowhere else to go, although we do have some rooms set aside also for homeless people who are at high risk of contracting COVID or who need to isolate because of exposure to COVID. That operation is going extremely well. It's a partnership with all 3 counties. All the counties are referring into it. And I have to say, I think we've learned some really valuable lessons in that process about how to make a shelter work better than what we had at the Bend Parole and Probation Center, which was sort of our first experiment with a mass congregate shelter. And we'll definitely be bringing those forward into our shelter plan for next year. We don't just, of course, have shelter and housing. NeighborImpact has 10 different major programs that it's working on at any given time. In the first, I had my staff run yesterday the food program numbers for the first 100 days of COVID. In the first 100 days of COVID from March 15th forward, we served 92,000 individuals with some sort of food service. We continue to run very high volumes through the food warehouse. We did buy a mobile pantry that's been a godsend for us, so that we were able to send that out into our communities and continue to distribute food. I'm so proud of all of our partner agencies. They have continued to be open and operate throughout the COVID pandemic. They can't do the shopping style that we had all been moving toward, but we are keeping that food flowing, and we do have lots of commodity coming down from USDA, and so we're going to continue to do that into the near future. And so please no one should be going hungry because of issues surrounding COVID and their lack of access to food. There's a food bank near you somewhere. If I shift gears quickly to energy, we have about $1 million that we just got, literally like yesterday, to distribute in energy assistance. So we're going to be able to continue to help people pay their energy bills. And we have a little tiny bit of money that we can use to help pilot a project to help people be able to pay water bills. This will be the first time we've ever gotten into the water business. So I'm really excited about being able to help people start learning that process and learning how to give some help there with people's bills as we go forward. I will be announcing details of both of those programs in the coming week. When we look at the legislative outlook, well, all I can tell you is it's not very clear. If I had a crystal ball, it would be very cloudy at the moment. So the legislature had a session. That session did not deal with any financial issues and only dealt with some regulatory issues. A lot of that session was taken up with discussion about the response to the Black Lives Matter protests and the need for policing reform. There was a bill that came out of that, House Bill 4212, which addressed emergency siting of shelters. That bill, I would say, was not as robust as perhaps we had hoped it would be. The language that's in there still would allow local jurisdictions to have a lot of say over where an emergency shelter can be placed, and would allow neighbors to raise protests through the regular land use system as far as how we place shelters. So probably not going to get a lot of relief from that. The governor has not yet set the date for a second session. The second session is supposed to come at the end of July or early part of August. The governor is waiting for the federal government to act. We've heard rumors about the HEROES Act. The HEROES Act probably isn't going anywhere, but some sort of additional stimulus is probably coming down, and the governor does not want to spend ahead in terms of state money before she's certain she's gotten every dollar of federal money that can be made available to support this crisis. So we expect there will be that second session once the feds have made it clear what they're going to do with the money. The governor's priority in that session is to hold schools harmless with the federal funds for the coming year. And that sets us up for somewhat of a difficult conversation about, are we going to prioritize funding for schools, or are we going to prioritize funding for homeless service providers and other human services needs? There is not enough money to go around in the budget. The last revenue forecast showed about a 10% reduction in overall funding for the next year. And so somewhere somebody has to give, because of state law. Prisons really can't give. And when you figure out, when you add up human services, education, and incarceration, you end up with 90% of the total general fund. So there's going to be some interesting flexing happening as we get there. That probably will set our marker for how we're going to be able to provide services in the year ahead. But we really are in a holding phase where we wait for the legislature to act. The congressional outlook, the legislative outlook is a model of clarity compared to the congressional outlook. The situation in Congress is that it's hard to, I want this job in Congress where you're on vacation more than you're working. That would actually be pretty cool. There are only 38 scheduled legislative days left between now and the end of the year. So that means whatever they're going to do, they have to get it crammed in, and they don't take votes on Fridays, so you can remove 8 of those. So they got 30 working days left to do any work between now and December 31st. The federal budget expires on September 30th. The House is shoving a whole lot of legislation through right now. The numbers that the House are putting out are stunning, eye-popping, enormous numbers in terms of the amount of money that would roll toward our programs if it were to pass the Senate and be approved by the White House. Now, that last if is a pretty big if, because the Senate has indicated it doesn't intend to take up any of that legislation until after the November election. So at this point, you're going to hear a lot from advocacy organization, others about, well, this bill, all this money that we could spend. Don't get your hopes up yet. It has to go through the whole process. So we're probably going to have 2 more continuing resolutions. Those are those wonderful little bills that say, well, you can spend over the next 5 to 8 weeks what you were spending last year, but don't spend more than that. It means a very short-term planning horizon. And of course, we're right in the middle of dealing with the winter season, homelessness, homeless response. And I think one of the things that we are most concerned about is the expiration of the eviction moratorium as it relates to homeowners and payments on mortgages at the end of September. When that comes out, then mortgage companies are in a position to go back and start demanding that people either pay up or face foreclosure. And that could be a real crisis for us. And there have been no funds appropriated to this point by the feds to deal with mortgage payment assistance or even foreclosure counseling. So we're a little bit concerned about what's going to happen there. We continue to work with Oregon Housing and Community Services to try and make sure that there is some funding put through to support that before we get to the fall. The other thing that could change things is a change of party, either in the White House or in one of the houses of Congress. That could be good, it could be bad, depending on what happens, but what it will be is change, and change always brings a slowdown in process, because you have to have new people get appointed and new people learn the ropes and all that sort of thing. So it could be an interesting fall for us, and I'm happy to come back and report to that when we have more clarity around what's happening right there. We are continuing to stay focused on the service to our many, many folks out there that need us. As far as I can tell, we are serving, at this point, we've served about 1% of the eligible rental households in all of Deschutes County. Just in the opening phases of this pandemic, we intend to serve a lot more, and we do have plenty of funding to be able to provide housing assistance. We're also going to be rolling out new emergency solutions grant money that we received this week. In the next couple of weeks, that will help us with expanding our rapid rehousing program a little bit. There's an old fortune cookie joke that says, "May you live in interesting times." I think that, that could be read as a blessing or a curse. Sometimes it's both. We certainly think maybe we have drawn that fortune cookie this particular time around with the COVID response, but we're making the best out of it. And we could not do this work without all of our partners that we have out there. That's all you folks and all those voices. So I just want to say thank you. I value you so much, and you are a tremendous asset to our region. And that's what I have to talk about this morning.
Thank you, Scott, and we'll stay in touch. And when you feel there's information you'd like to share, we're happy to invite you back to address our group.
Thank you.
Yeah. Following on Scott's comments, I've got some announcements that are related to shelters, so I think I'll slide those in right now. The first one is I'd like to thank and welcome Tara Furtado from Bethlehem Inn, who has stepped up to replace George Myers as the chair of our shelter committee. And I think the people who have been involved in the shelter committee to this point have already received an email for her as she starts to do some planning about how we move forward. And I'd also like to send a big shout out to George for having stepped up to do that for the past year or so, and for all the work he's done with HLC in the past. And we know we'll have the opportunity to work with him again in the future, and we look forward to that. The second item relates to the Bend Winter Shelter, and there is an editorial in today's bulletin pointing out the need for the winter shelter, and I would refer everyone to that. I think it was a good editorial, had some good points to make. We have been in contact with both the county and the city to try to determine a location, which at the moment is our primary focus. Funding is also a concern, but we don't know exactly what that will look like. The county and city don't have a location that's publicly owned, to offer this year, but we're hopeful that we can, with their help and the help of others, identify a location. And we expect to be announcing a all hands on deck community meeting to discuss the winter shelter in the next week or so. Also, we had an update from Shepherd's House. And I'm going to paraphrase some of this, but regarding the winter shelter, Shepherd's House has stepped up and offered to manage the winter shelter this year, provided we can find adequate location and funding. And again, they're stepping up to manage, but actually making the hard work happen and making the location happen is really going to have to be a community project. And as we've seen in the last year, the existence of a winter shelter isn't critical just for Bend. It helps our other shelters, Bethlehem Inn, Shepherd's House, and also our winter shelter in Redmond run more efficiently and keep from going over their capacity. So this is really critical for all of Central Oregon, and I hope the community will come together to make it happen. Still from Shepherd's House, the Redmond Winter Shelter, they've been discussing the location with their host churches. There's 3 churches that have been hosting the winter shelter in Redmond on a rotating basis. And right now, those churches are involved heavily in discussions about how they're going to open for their services and other activities. So discussions about the winter shelter are happening, but are not the absolute top priority of those locations at the moment. And we still don't know what social distancing will do as far as the capacity of those locations. And finally, the Men's Center is now taking very limited intakes for their residential program. And that's a process that involves initial testing and quarantine. At first, the Men's Center will take in men who have been in the program already, have left, and now seek to return. And it remains a question of how many additional intakes will occur in the near future. But for now, the number of intakes is going to remain low. And with that, I'd like to introduce my co-chair, Colleen Thomas, who wears a couple other hats. I'll let her fill you in on those if she wants to tell us about the results of this year's point in time count. So thank you, Colleen.
Thanks, James, and good morning, everybody. Thank you for being with us today and bearing with us through the changes of COVID-19 and adapting to this virtual online platform. It's new for all of us, and so thank you for your patience as I kind of fumble through this today. And I also just want to acknowledge that, again, to second what Scott said, is thank you to all the advocates and supporters of the Homeless Leadership Coalition and all service providers for really bringing light and voice to those experiencing homelessness across our region and the impacts not only of COVID-19, but just I think we are seeing highlights of the need for more services and I think, again, the importance of communication and collaboration as we move forward. I think we're going to see an increase of folks needing additional support and access to services as we move through COVID-19. So today, though, I am going to be presenting our much awaited 2020 point in time count numbers. And so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you all. And we'll go through a PowerPoint for our point in time count numbers. Okay, so again, so the point in time count for this year, as you all might be aware, is a count that serves is throughout our Tri-County region for Central Oregon, Deschutes, Crook, and Jefferson counties, including the Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs. So just to highlight, again, the Homeless Leadership Coalition, we are a collaboration of community partners in Crook, Jefferson, and Deschutes counties, including the Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs. The mission of the HLC is to engage the community through education, advocacy, planning, prioritization, and accountability for services to individuals experiencing homelessness. We, as the HLC, are driven by the knowledge that together we are stronger, healthier, safer communities where people can thrive when everyone has a safe and stable place to call home. Okay, so what is the point in time count? I'm sure many of you are aware of what that is, but just to highlight again, PIT, as you might hear it referred to, is a HUD-mandated nationwide survey of all individuals experiencing homelessness on a single night in January. That is how HUD has defined what the point in time count needs to be. The intent is to monitor numbers, demographics, potential causes of homelessness, and how individuals are accessing services and resources in the community. So we administer the point in time count here in Central Oregon. The Continuum of Care, which is the Homeless Leadership Coalition, works with volunteers in each community to complete the point in time count. So methodology. So this past year, we conducted the survey on the night of January 29th. So we always ask the question of where did individuals sleep on the night of January 29th? We collect surveys over a span of 3 days. And with that, though, we ask where did the individual sleep on the night of the 29th? So again, as I mentioned, it's dozens of trained volunteers that go through a training, complete confidentiality forms, and then are deployed with their community leads in each area to complete the survey. Some of those places include food banks, drop-in centers, healthcare clinics, street outreach, and going out to campsites on the national forests, and street canvassing. This past year, we did collect surveys electronically as well as paper surveys. Again, counts took place across the Tri-County region in all communities, including the Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs. So quick, brief definitions that you might hear. A lot of folks refer to the HUD homeless, which is a lot different than maybe what we collect here in Central Oregon. But HUD homeless, they have two categories, sheltered and unsheltered. So sheltered, very standard, is folks that are staying in emergency shelter, transitional housing, or a hotel or motel paid with a voucher. And unsheltered is a place not meant for human habitation, a car, abandoned building, RV without hookups, things along those lines. And then all people experiencing homelessness or at risk for homelessness is what we consider to be precariously housed. That, as well as at risk for homelessness, is when individuals are in an unstable housing situation, such as doubled up or not staying with somebody and not on the lease. Okay, why is PIT so important? The point in time count helps us to monitor racial disparities in services, ensuring equity for minority clients. It helps to identify need based on location, ensuring that the resources that we do have are allocated where they're needed most. It provides invaluable information about our neighbors experiencing homelessness and allows us to shape our services to meet their needs. And it really, I think, shows the prevalence of homelessness in Central Oregon. Even though this is a HUD mandated survey that we do each year, it really allows us as service providers to see where the need is and to be able to use that data to go back to the federal government or local government to show the need for more services and funding in our region. Okay, so here we're going to get into the data piece of things. And as I go through this, I just really want to give a shout out and a huge thank you to Katie Jordan, who is our HMIS lead with NeighborImpact. The data is really hard to go through. We have certain areas in which we need to collect data, and there are certain demographics and issues along with collecting all that data. And so Katie has spent the last several months really doing a lot of data integrity, going through all the data. And I just really want to say thank you to her for all of her hard work in regards to compiling all the numbers. It is a difficult process, as many of you may be aware, and then throw COVID in there and the delay to HUD and some of the numbers that they want. It's been a trying season to collect that data, but this is what we have. And again, thank you, Katie and NeighborImpact, for all your work on that. Okay, so how many people were experiencing homelessness in Central Oregon on January 29th, 2020? As you can see, this graphic kind of gives you percentages of what the population is, but the total number that we collected of individuals experiencing homelessness on January 29th was 969 individuals across the region. And of that 969, 41% were families, 52% were single individuals, 5% youth, 0.5% children only, and 1.5% of young families. Okay, so we're going to go through, break it out a little bit by county. So here you can see in Deschutes County, we had kind of almost a split between sheltered and unsheltered individuals that were, and again, these are numbers of folks that were completed surveys on in regards to point in time count. This we acknowledge that this is just a snippet of the overall population of those experiencing homelessness. And so I think it's important to remember, we know that this is just a snapshot and that the population is a lot bigger than what the point in time count might show. So Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs, a high population of folks that were unsheltered versus sheltered. When it says other, that is referring to individuals that are precariously housed or at risk of homelessness. That is something that we do gather here in Deschutes County. It is not a mandate of HUD. That is something that we've chosen to capture here in Central Oregon. All right. Crook County, again, a high population of unsheltered individuals. Jefferson County. So again, one of the things that we've really seen is a high population of unsheltered individuals in the region. All right, ages broken out by population. And I just want to highlight too, we will have this PowerPoint up on our website and can get it out to folks on our listserv as well in the newsletter. And we'll have another infographic for you all, a one-pager with some more broken out identified numbers. But this is just kind of giving you a sense of what we're seeing or what we saw from the point in time count this past year. So as you can see, we have, which is common, something that we've seen a trend in, a lot of folks that are experiencing homelessness fall into that 40 to 60 age range. Also, though, you'll see that a high population of folks under age 18, so that unaccompanied youth number. Okay, race and ethnicity by county. So just so you know, I didn't pull out on these, but first column is Deschutes County, second column is Crook County, third column is Jefferson County, and the last is the Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs. So again, not something that we see a huge difference in years past, a high population of folks that identify as white non-Hispanic. That is something that we see in a lot of our reporting. Gender by county, so pretty even split almost across the region. A definitely higher population of individuals identifying as male, but pretty split in regards across the region by gender. All right. We're going to jump into some other questions that were asked on our point in time count survey. These are questions that we elected to ask here in Central Oregon because we have found and have been requested by service providers to gather this information of additional information to help us provide clearer services. So here, and this question on our survey is, were you able to access healthcare when needed in the last year? So one of the things that we think is great is that most respondents said, yes, I was able to access my healthcare when I needed it in the last year. So kudos to our healthcare system, especially right now in the midst of COVID. And then we asked for a little bit more clarifying information in regards to healthcare, of where individuals accessed healthcare. So in Deschutes County, high population of folks said that they access a regular doctor. And then again, you can see the medical van. We have a lot of folks that access our Mosaic medical van, which is still up and running through COVID and has added different locations because it's really filling a huge need for our folks that are experiencing homelessness. You also do see a high percentage of folks accessing the emergency room here in Deschutes County. Crook County, of those that responded, a lot of folks said that they were able to access healthcare, but they were accessing that at the local emergency room. Jefferson County, again, a lot of folks said that they've accessed their regular doctor, which is great. Okay. And then how healthcare was accessed at the Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs, of that high population of folks accessing the Indian Health Services there from their respondents. Okay, another question that we ask in Central Oregon, which has been a high request from service providers and community members, of we often hear folks say that that people are coming to Central Oregon because of whether it be our healthcare system or the services we provide. It's, kind of this NIMBYism mentality that we often hear. And so we do like to collect this data so that we can utilize this to kind of, again, show the community that folks are actually are from here and are experiencing homelessness here in Central Oregon. So 74% of participant surveys had lived in Central Oregon for over a year. So as you can kind of see that breakout, the high population of folks, 42% have lived here for 1 to 5 years, but we have a high population of folks, 13% that have lived here for 10 or more years. So that kind of goes back into the next slide here, that in regards to NIMBYism, that folks experience homelessness here in Central Oregon and aren't coming here experiencing homelessness. So the majority, 84%, were last housed in Oregon prior to becoming homeless. And then only 16% of the population was last housed out of state and came to Oregon experiencing homelessness. So again, this is the question we ask on the survey is, where were you last stably housed? And so 64% of the respondents said that they were last stably housed in Central Oregon and became homeless. Okay, moving on. Okay, so causes of homelessness. We asked this question of what was the reason that what is your experience of homelessness? What was the cause of that? And so this is what we received in regards to those folks that answered those questions. And one thing I'd like to highlight here is that participants were able to select multiple reasons. All reasons were counted separately and included in this chart. So there could oftentimes folks that answered this question would pick one or more reasons for experiencing homelessness. As you can see, high response for personal reasons, and that includes divorce, conflict in the home, drug or alcohol abuse of a family member, so that just issues within the home or conflict with family members. Second highest, actually the highest is economic, which if somebody identified that they became homeless for economic reasons, that would include inability to afford rent or loss of a job. So you can see a lot of folks, and I know from personal experience in completing the survey with many individuals that was the leading answer for folks, that they were renting and then the rent was raised and they couldn't afford it, or they lost a job and were no longer able to maintain their current rental because of cost. Another area that folks referred to for reason for experiencing homelessness is legal, and that could include criminal history, but it also could include legal housing issues like the property I was renting and the property sold, or I had a no-fault eviction and things like that. Okay. So I know, and we mentioned, or James started to mention, and Scott, the need for cold weather shelter. This past year, we saw a lot of folks that were accessing our cold weather shelters in Central Oregon. Even in a, we had warmer temperatures this past year, but we still saw a lot of folks accessing our services at the warming shelters. And again, I want to just come back to the beginning of the presentation when I said we all acknowledge that the point in time count is just a snapshot of the larger population of those experiencing homelessness in our region. And there's many reasons for that. We ask a lot of folks, when it comes, we do a lot of education in regards to the point in time count and continue to ensure that it is kept confidential, that the locations won't be shared and different things along those lines. But we have a lot of folks that refuse to participate in the point in time count. And so that is one of the reasons for our lower numbers when we look at the respondents of those participating in the point in time count. So with all that being said, I just wanted to we include some of these numbers that we have from this past year. As you can see, so these are unique guests that accessed our cold weather shelters in each county versus the point in time count numbers. So as you can see, just in Deschutes County, there were 784 unique individuals that accessed warming shelters or cold weather shelters this past year, and only 562 individuals were participating in the point in time count. So that just shows you that there's a larger population of folks that are in our region and are experiencing homelessness. Again, really important, and it kind of highlights the need for us to continue to provide that resource of a cold weather shelter across our region, because that is where folks feel safe. They have access to basic needs, and again, our hope as the Homeless Leadership Coalition is to continue to collect that data so that we have a better overview of the population in our region. So one of the things that was asked of us is kind of to think about how can we prevent and end homelessness? As I said in the beginning of this presentation, that is our goal, and we as the Homeless Leadership Coalition feel and know that folks are, we are a stronger community when folks have a stable place to call home. And so, one of the big things that we talk about is prevention and stability. An essential approach to ending and reducing homelessness is to prevent it. And I think right now, one of the great things as Scott has mentioned, and the great work of NeighborImpact and other community partners in our region of helping folks to make sure they're paying their rent, especially in the time of COVID. It's important for us, if we can help folks maintain their housing, we will see lower numbers of folks experiencing homelessness. And part of that, is eviction prevention. And that's where the rent assistance through NeighborImpact is really coming in to help folks. Also, housing courts is a potential option that we could bring to our region, is something that as the Homeless Leadership Coalition is looking at, of being able to support individuals as they go through potential eviction processes. And we want to do, more effective discharge planning that includes housing assistance. So folks that are coming out of the jail or prison system, and helping them to really work at what that exit strategy is so that they're not exiting into our community experiencing homelessness. And of course, going back to kind of what Scott was talking about with the legislation is, we need broader policy changes. And, that's a big undertaking, but I think it's something that as the Homeless Leadership Coalition looks at our point in time count numbers and ways of intervention, that we want to be able to elevate the need for, living wage jobs, affordable health care, more affordable housing. And and one of the things we talk about often is when it comes to affordable housing, we as a community need to identify what affordable is. So just a few things. And, to kind of wrap it up, what are solutions in regards to how do we impact change and support those folks that are experiencing homelessness? We would love to see a landlord mitigation fund here in Central Oregon to help support folks getting into housing. And what that looks like is to be able to work with landlords and say, we have this resource that will, is a guaranteed support for when you are placing our folks in our programs, that we could support for damages or pay upfront deposits and, maybe even some extra rent to just ensure that landlords are wanting to partner with us. A big one that we really desperately need here in Central Oregon is permanent supportive housing. That way we can work with folks on a housing first approach to get folks into housing and then address some of the other barriers that individuals might have in regards to substance abuse, employment, mental health, and things like that. If we had a more robust permanent supportive housing program here, we would really be able to impact more change. We could use more direct service dollars for more homeless outreach, really to be able to be on the streets, engaging folks and ensuring that they have access to all the resources that they need. As I mentioned, homeless prevention strategies, warming shelters, and low barrier shelters. We, especially in the midst of COVID-19, in talking with our shelters, we are really seeing that there is a need for a low barrier shelter in our region so that folks can still access that shelter and safety, but that aren't having those other barriers to ensuring that they can safely stay in shelters. And then mental health outreach. If there is more support for that for folks that are experiencing homelessness, it would be a huge impact in our region. And, to kind of round it out is we do need more comprehensive data. As you can see, the point in time count numbers are not, their numbers, it's more than not having any kind of data, but we really want to, as the Homeless Leadership Coalition, be able to provide more comprehensive data for all of our service providers to be able to use that data to go to apply for grants and bring more resources to our community. Because we know that, again, point in time count is a snapshot. I know you've heard me say that multiple times, but we really need to be able to have more comprehensive data. And so that is something that we as the Homeless Leadership Coalition are working at, working with community partners, including, the Central Oregon Health Council on some of their objectives and outcomes that they want to see is also more data. So we're strategizing and looking at ways that we can increase that data. And so with that, I just want to say, we as we move forward, we really thank all of you for participating. We wouldn't be able to do the point in time count without all of you. And we have a call out to anyone that wants to join us for the point in time count this, next year and has any strategies for us or suggestions. We welcome that. We have a mandate that we need to follow, but that doesn't mean that we can't think strategically as a community and welcome, again, more participation suggestions. And so please stay connected with us. Join our newsletter at cohomeless.org. If you have questions, you can always reach out to James or I on how to get involved. And we just really appreciate and thank all of you for the support that you do provide to us. And remember that we are an all-volunteer organization. And so we can't do this work without all of your support. So with that, we will be posting this PowerPoint on our website, and we will be providing that one pager, as I mentioned, in regards to some more called out data. If you have questions about your community or what those numbers are specifically, you can always reach out, like I said, to James or I at info@cohomeless.org. All right, James.
Thank
Off
you,
to you.
Colleen.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. We've got some more announcements here, and some of these are events that have links. So remember, you can go to cohomeless.org, scroll down below the picture, and the first link should be these announcements, including the links to the actual event information. While you're on that page, if you scroll down all the way to the bottom, and on the right side, there's the sign up for our newsletter. And we're working to make that our primary point of contact in the future, and phasing out our listserv, hopefully. So we've got some upcoming trainings that we're happy to announce in conjunction with the AT project. The first is a fair housing online training on Wednesday, July 15th from 1 to 2 p.m. The link's on our website. The Fair Housing Council of Oregon will provide training on housing discrimination, equal access to housing, and information specifically related to federal, state, and local fair housing and laws. That's going to be a Zoom meeting. There's also an upcoming training, human trafficking awareness online training from the AT project. The AT project is a member, I'm sorry, I should mention that that's going to be Wednesday, August 12th from 10 to 11. And the AT project is a member providing team. The AT project provides coordination for the Hughes County Commercially Sexually Exploited Children Response Team, the group responsible to responding to cases of human trafficking in Central Oregon. And it's a collaboration of agencies throughout the area to provide a comprehensive approach to child sex trafficking and services to victims and survivors. In this training, you will learn about resources and efforts taking place in our communities, basic principles of the work, and how to support clients who are at risk. Moving on, Thrive Central Oregon would like to communicate that they've partnered with NeighborImpact in an effort to maximize rental assistance distribution in our community. At this point, Thrive is not accepting applications for rental assistance. They're asking for folks who are interested in applying for rental assistance to do so through NeighborImpact. When NeighborImpact funding for rental assistance has been depleted, we will resume accepting rental applications for those who continue to be financially impacted by COVID-19. And although they're not accepting rental assistance applications at the moment, they continue to accept mortgage assistance applications for those who have been impacted by COVID-19 and are under 60% of AMI, and that's for the Bend-Redmond area. If you have questions, info@thrivecentraloregon.org. Legal Aid wants us to mention that information on HB 4213, the eviction moratorium, is available online at OregonLawHelp.org, and the full link will be on the cohomeless.org website, along with the phone number for legal aid. The grants committee is still awaiting receiving the NOFA for this year's round of grants funding. And they encourage Homeless Leadership Coalition members to review the grants tab on our website, which is cohomeless.org/grants. There you can find last year's material to get a sense of the timeline in the application process. As soon as we have the NOFA from HUD, the materials will be updated for this competition cycle. Individuals who want to learn more about the process for applying can email grants@cohomeless.org for more information, or speak to Colleen and I or Lindsay Staling, who is our grants chairperson. And last announcement here, I believe, let me review my notes. Yeah, is the Redmond Police have announced that Lieutenant Curtis Chambers has been named the new homeless liaison for Redmond Police Department, and we look forward to working with him in the future. Colleen, I don't mean to hit you with a surprise question. I'm just not sure I have updated information, and perhaps you do, but we had a question about what's happened after the Juniper Ridge evictions and where people are moving forward with that. And I know one concern is finding a location to provide outreach, but I was wondering if you had any additional information.
Yeah, thanks, James. So we do have a Juniper Ridge committee group that is meeting and working with the city of Bend to identify another location for service providers to continue to provide that mobile outreach that has been taking place on Thursday mornings. Both the city and county are looking at access points to Juniper Ridge to ensure that there is safety point access to that area. There are many complicated layers to that. And so we are looking and working with the city of Bend to potentially identify an alternative location and working with service providers for their input on where a location may be. So that's kind of an update.
Great, thank you. So before closing, as we're finishing out our hour here, I want to again remind people that this has been something of an experiment for us, and we're looking to refine this format and improve it. And perhaps when some sense of normalcy returns, we can begin having a hybrid type meeting where people can attend in person, but also attend online so that people aren't required to travel sometimes a half hour, 45 minutes to attend a meeting. So please feel free to send us your comments, questions, suggestions at info@cohomeless.org. Also, if you have additional announcements that you'd like me to add to the page that we have online, you can send them there. And any other questions you might have, we'll try to get you answers. So I want to thank particularly Scott and Colleen for their presentations. It's greatly appreciated. I think we've given people a good idea of the current environment. And thank everyone else for attending. And we look forward to seeing you in person sometime, hopefully not in the too distant future. And thanks everyone for attending. And we'll see you next month. We'll try to do the same thing again. Thank you. Oh, and sorry, this will be available, the recording will be available on our Facebook page. Want to make sure you can share that with anyone who might be interested. Thank you. Bye.